Hello and welcome to Season 5, Episode 4 of Logicast, the AWS News podcast brought to you by Logicata. I'm Carl Robinson, CEO and co-founder of Logicata, and I'm joined today, as always, by Principal Cloud Engineer John Goodall. How are you doing today, John?
Monday. We haven't recorded Monday kind of morning-ish for a while, and I'm not used to this.
Well, also, you won't have had your lunch yet, which I know is an incredibly important part of your day. And if the hunger pangs are kicking in, then may we get hangry John partway through the episode, do you think?
I don't know, maybe. I realised that this was happening during my normal lunch period because I eat quite early. So I think I've staved them off with a pair of custard creams.
Oh, yes,
I like
very
custard
British.
cream. King of the biscuits.
Have you had the Marks and Spencer's giant ones?
Yes, they're very expensive. You get like 6 in a packet, and they had to. I don't know where I heard this, but of all things, it might be my mum that told me this, that they had to run it through the chocolate thing machine that covers it in chocolate twice because it's too big to get a proper coating once. Hence, they're really expensive. They've got a shed load of chocolate on them.
Well, there we go. We are talking about very British biscuit sugary snacks, which will be of no interest to today's guest, who I should introduce. We're delighted to have Ran Eisenberg, AWS hero, joining us again today. How are you doing today, Ran?
Awesome. Thanks for having me again.
So you mentioned in our little preamble there that those sweet treats that John is describing will not be of any interest to you anymore.
I mean, British sweets are always great. I mean, if I recall from the last time we had the hike at the reInvent community builders hike, what was it? The mint?
Yeah, I brought.
And you brought Manx knobs.
Manx knobs, yeah. I brought Manx knobs.
Quite unique, honestly, but I enjoyed it. It was quite unique.
Yeah. So, Ran, it's great to have you back on the podcast. I know you've been a guest before, but for the benefit of any listeners who've not heard that episode, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do for the community, what you do for a living, etc.
Sure. So I'm a principal software architect at CyberArk. That's what I do for a living. I'm also a consultant for everything serverless and platform engineering. And also I'm an AWS serverless hero. I have a website, runthebuilder.cloud, and I talk about platform engineering, serverless, AWS, even AI now, apparently. And I do public speaking and blog posts and things like that.
I need to get a .cloud domain. I need to do that.
Or a .ai domain, which is now supported on Route 53, apparently, in the domain registrar. I saw an article about that this morning.
Don't tell me that. I'm going to have more domains that I'm going to do nothing with.
But all the good ones are already taken. So
yeah, you have to be creative, I guess. That's why there are so many companies out there with weird names like Logicata, I guess, because it's very difficult to find a domain name for anything that that might pop into your mind quickly. So great to have you on again, Ran. You mentioned you're a serverless hero. We've got a couple of serverless articles to discuss in our agenda today. But before we do, as regular listeners to the podcast will know, once a week I curate a list of AWS news, which I share via my weekly AWS News Roundup newsletter. Then John picks a selection of the articles that we would like to discuss on the podcast with our guest. So the first article that we wanted to discuss this week is more of a feature announcement, really. But this is the announcement that AWS Lambda announces cross-account access for DynamoDB streams. So, John, I've just noticed the date on this article. Actually, it was published on my birthday.
Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday, me. What a great gift from AWS for my birthday. Cross-account access for DynamoDB streams.
Just what you requested, right?
Exactly, yeah. I just, that's just made my birthday. Even though it was a couple of weeks ago, it's just made me feel warm and fuzzy inside.
Oh, you need a hobby. Jeez.
I have a hobby, but it's not AWS Lambda, unfortunately. But John, what was it that caught your eye about this one, other than the fact that it had my birthday as the
I didn't even notice that. I didn't even see that.
If it had been your birthday as a publication date, you might have spotted it, which is only the day before my birthday.
Such life. So this is an interesting one. I feel a little bit mixed. about this. So I've done a number of things historically with DynamoDB streams triggering lambdas because that's quite useful, right? It's a bit of the old concept of a trigger in a database, the idea of something happens and then you can react to that, okay? A stream is just literally that. It's a stream of things have happened to this table, spew that out on functionally an event bus, sub a lambda to it. Lambda can do things with it or not, because you can filter based on whatever, and the lambda can dump things out if it doesn't want to do anything with it. Great, wonderful. That's really useful for tracking, for, as I said, reacting to events in your table. Great for event-driven architectures. Wonderful. I have never personally come across a use case, and maybe this is because my use of this has been quite limited, I'll admit that, where I've thought I could really do with triggering something in a different account as a result of this, mostly because all of the workloads that I've built have been kind of the one thing. I could possibly see a use case for this in like an audit tracking scenario, and I guess it makes life a little bit easier in that regard because you don't have to put things like SQS or EventBridge or whatever in the middle. So taking things out and making the architecture simpler, I guess maybe is a good thing. But I don't know where this has come from because I never saw a massive demand for this. But then I don't have visibility on the product roadmap, so maybe I'm wrong.
Somebody asked for it. I mean, somebody somewhere asked for it, and they built it. Not sure why, but they did. Honestly.
Somebody important.
Perhaps.
Well, we've had this conversation before, haven't we? I can't remember. I think it was on Pod. I don't remember who, but we've had a few AWS pods on. It might have been Matthias that said this. I don't know. That said that has never once in the history of anything ever happened that it was one person asking, no matter how much they pay. Apparently.
Well, more than one person asked for it.
At least two people.
Yeah. But what are your thoughts on this, Ran? Is it can you see some use cases for it?
I'm not sure. Like I think it's kind of like an anti-pattern, to be honest, because why do you have something in a different account? Usually, the way I see, the way I work, usually different accounts. If it's the same service, then one account can be for dev environment, test, production, whatever. So I don't want, for this use case, one account to trigger in another account because I'm mixing two environments, right? Another use case would be you have two different microservices or services, each one in a different account, which is great. But then again, what's the interface between them? I mean, sure, it can work, but it means that they're getting the schema, the changes in my database, which is quite my implementation details. So if tomorrow I internally add another field or rename one of the fields in my DynamoDB schema, which is something that I should be able to do. This is my domain, my database. It's now become a contract because depending on what I change, I might break the other guys, the other services, stream handler, because the schema is now different, not what they expect. So for me, that's quite the anti-pattern. I wouldn't use it. At place, you can use your stream in your own account, and then you can ship it via SQS or whatever you want, or SNS, EventBridge, whatever you want to the different account, and define the schema there. So you abstract whatever internal implementation you have fun with the schema, change it however you see fit. But when you send it to the other account, you have the defined contract between the two of you. I think that would be a better approach. Now, when I wrote it on LinkedIn, it got, I don't know, you got nice, like 50 plus likes, I think, which was nice. But also I got a response from AWS, solution architect, if I recall, and he said that customers wanted it because, again, some auditing central account, and they didn't want to have another moving part in the middle with the SQS and pay for those messages again. But I don't know, even for that use case, I'd argue that maybe you'd want everything to go to a fire hose, and then you can still route it perfectly with the streams through the Lambda to Firehose or something else, and then you can combine messages from all sorts of databases, streams, whatever you want to one central location. So it feels very, very niche, I'd say, this solution. I guess it solves somebody a problem. I wouldn't use it.
Yeah, the contract thing is always an interesting one, and it's the sort of thing I'm starting to get my head around a bit more. I don't inherently think that this makes breaking that sort of contract more likely, but it makes it easier to do, as it were, because you don't have that extra piece in the middle where you're then looking at the schema that you've just changed, because it's just sort of being shipped without you really having to think about it. So I don't think it makes it more likely or more damaging, but it makes it easier to break that by accident.
Yeah, because when you do that, you make the changes in your own account, but you might not be affected in the other account. You don't have the visibility. You don't see when it breaks.
Yeah, I've worked in ETL processing systems before, and this problem is as old as time, right? If you have teams that send data to each other that don't necessarily talk to each other very often, the format of that file's changed. That happens constantly.
So a new feature, but not a lot of love for it.
I don't hate it. I just don't necessarily see why.
Yeah,
totally agree. Carl, you should tell them to give you a better present next year.
Yeah, well, I had to see what other features were announced on my birthday, but I'd rather it was one that people got excited about. But then, it wasn't a landmark birthday. I only really celebrate the ones with zeros on the end anymore. This one didn't have a zero on the end, so in a few years' time, when I have one with a zero on the end, then I want a big announcement for that one. So.
like a bedrock agent core service, like a new service or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or big new data center in the UK or something like that, which we also had last week, but I don't think that was on my birthday. But anyway, moving on then to our next article, staying with the subject of Lambda. This is an article on DZone, I think it's pronounced, which is a
DZone, I think.
DZone, yeah, DZone. I don't know, because you got DAZN, which is the sports streaming service, but that's not this. This is DZone.
Oh, is that how you pronounce that?
Yeah,
I've never heard that said out loud. I know a guy that went to work there that we both used to work with, and I'd only ever seen it written down.
DAZN, yeah, it's sports streaming service, but yeah, nothing to do with this. This is DZone, where technical articles are published, and this is an article about Lambda durable functions, which I think was announced at reInvent this year, if I'm right, because we did our reInvent recap at the AWS Brighton user group last week, and I'm pretty sure that was one of your whistle stop announcements as you raced through the
Yes, and 15% of the audience got very excited. It was one guy.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a small user group, given it was the UK. It was dark, wet January evening. So not a lot of people turned out for free beer and pizza on Tuesday, Wednesday of last week. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about AWS Lambda durable functions. John, what was it that got you excited about this article?
Again, you use this term excited. I wouldn't say excited about this sort of thing.
Is it more exciting than the last one?
I don't know. I think they're both equally. This is more interesting. I think this is more useful, but I wouldn't say
it's more important. I think it has more use cases, I guess. Somebody will find love for this for sure.
Yes, the 15% of our audience. So the point with durable functions, the short version, I don't understand all the nuances, and there's bits and pieces to it that I haven't dug into yet, but it starts to take away the need for external orchestration tools when you want your Lambda to run longer than 15 minutes. That's kind of the long and short of it, right? Up until durable functions was a thing, your Lambda, I don't know what the original timeout limit was, but up until a couple of weeks ago, it was 15 minutes. 15 minutes, probably long enough for most event-driven things, but if you're being absolutely militant about, I will only ever use Lambdas, I don't want to use ECS tasks, or I don't want to have servers or any of that malarkey, then that started to be an issue if you needed things to run longer than that, right? I'm thinking things like, I don't know, Stripe payment webhooks, this kind of thing. That's kind of an example that I'm aware of, where stuff just, you're waiting for an external party for 10 or 15, 20 minutes potentially for something to come back. Other payment providers exist. I'm sure other use cases for, I've kicked off a thing and I just need to sit and wait for it for a while. And you have to come up with creative ways of handling that with things like callbacks and step functions and all this sort of jazz. Durable functions kind of solves for that. So where these workflows existed where you had like 2 or 3 step functions, literally just to get around timeout issues, all of that kind of starts to go away. The retries work a little bit differently. So it's configurable to handle failures, but I don't think it necessarily follows the exact same route through the function every time it's called. So you have to be aware of the fact that your execution context is reused. It's not clean every time. So that's, that's a thing. It's useful. I need to get more into this. I don't necessarily think we're going to make massive use of it to start with, because again, for the podcast processing that we do, which I've spoken about repeatedly, we use a step function for exactly this reason, right? Because we've got 4 or 5 different prompts to run through, and they will genuinely take more than 15 minutes if you kind of do all of them in the same execution. Ergo, they've been split out. We've done an iterator in a step function, but we do a lot of other things in the step function as well. So I'm probably not going to change that design pattern now. But, if I was coming to it brand new, I might do, because it's a lot simpler, right? You get 1 or 2 lambdas rather than the 10 that I've had to write. So it's useful. I'm not a good enough developer to really understand the nuances of it, though.
I bet Ran is.
I've got a well, thanks. I haven't played with them, but I did understand. I think I understand how they work. I think it's a very clever solution on AWS side. Basically, it's not like you get one function that runs more than 15 minutes. You have like a trick. You have like it's more meta. Like you define steps, but it's using the AWS new SDK that you have. And it knows each time that you say, okay, now move to the next step in the SDK, it stops the invocation, starts a new invocation, but knows where to continue from the last point. Like it stores like a context. So it's the same function, but each time you have 15 minutes, and you can even ask how much time do I have, like with a function, and see whether you should do something or move to the next step or whatever. So it's not like you get like a cheat. You're not cheating anyone. It's still step function. You're still running Lambda function. It's still 15 minutes. The only difference is the developer experience. Okay. So step functions, you can define steps, waits, retries, failures, states, whatever. And you have direct integrations built in, and you define everything with JSON or with very complex CDK code and things like that. And it had some issues because testing was a bit hard. But then they went ahead at reInvent and also presented this test state API, which allows you to simulate in an end-to-end scenario steps that are failing. So you can check that your retries and failures and all the configurations are actually working. So that was like a gap that was missing in step function. But then people said, you know what? I don't like using the JSON configuration. I don't like direct integrations. I want to write my own code. I'm a developer. That's what I do. I want to write code. So they built an SDK that allows you to write basically the same capabilities of step function, but you do everything in one function, one code, and you have this shiny SDK, and it has a new testing SDK, which I didn't try, so I'm not sure about the developer experience there. But in a nutshell, you can do the same thing, just differently. That's the entire idea, basically. And the interesting thing is that I remember I consulted for a few startups that their business idea was actually you use our SDK to build kind of like state machines, and they relied on step function behind the scenes. So now that you can use AWS's SDK to write step function, these startups have no business, to exist. They basically put them out of business. Because now you have the other option. So I think it comes down to your choice of, developer experience. Do you like the old way, or do you want to try the new way with writing everything in code? Honestly, unless you really want to, I'm not sure that you need to migrate your existing step function.
Yeah, that sort of thing where I've said this a few times, but the best way of getting Amazon to fix a nasty problem is work around it badly. Okay, cool. But if you build a business based on that premise, it's always a worry that Amazon are going to come along and take your lunch, which, that happens quite a lot with these sorts of things. The other interesting thing for me is this is another example, I think, of services starting to blur the lines between each other. So we've seen this in a few other places, where you see things like ECS, what's the name of it? That
What,
thing
you
that
mean
I don't like.
Fargate? You mean
No,
Fargate?
no. Well, I mean that's one kind of example, right? Where you've got Fargate, you can back into EC2 or EC2 Spot. Sorry, ECS into EC2 or EC2 Spot, or ECS backing into Fargate, and then Fargate Spot, and then reservations, and it all just becomes a bit kind of a mess.
And
And this
Lambda
is kind of
managed
another,
instances now
yeah,
uses EC2. Yeah.
yeah, where all of the lines are just sort of starting to become a little bit blurry, and it's not very clear. I have this requirement. What thing should I use? It's always been a bit hard to work that out, and it's just getting harder. I like this as a service because, as you say, it solves for the testability a little bit, because local state for step functions is horrid. Doing anything short of a proper integration test with a step function and the test state API is not great. So this becomes easier to test for developers that understand test frameworks, which is fine, cool. It's just the answer to, well, which service do I use to solve this problem, has just become more complicated again. And for me, that's a little bit annoying because I need to renew an exam certificate soon. So the answer is going to be, well, what should you use for this?
Ask the MCP
Ask the
server.
AI.
Yeah. Ask the MCP server, the well-architected MCP server, or the AWS MCP server is the one that sits at the top, I think, isn't it? But there's the well-architected one, and then I don't know, is there a serverless one? I don't know. I haven't memorized the full list. There's loads of them.
Lots.
Yeah, lots of MCP servers, but yeah, that should be the answer to every question now, shouldn't it? In an AWS exam.
MCP is old news. Now it's all about skills, now, right? Skills is the new kid in town.
I thought that was an Alexa thing from years ago that died a death, but it's coming back. Like all fashion, it's cyclical. So, yeah.
Well, Kiro has, they call it powers, which I think is just like a bundle of a bunch of MCPs, is I think how that works. I don't really understand it.
It's a bit different. It's not really related. It can kind of replace MCP in a way. Like you basically, instead of calling an MCP that does an action for you, you describe the implementation of the action, like actual with MD files. You can describe, this is how you can connect to GitHub. This is the CLI command that you do, and this is what you do next. And for creating a pull request, this is the API you do like this, and then the LLM can read it and gain a new skill. Like you read a book, it can read a skill and level up. So
I heard it described by one of our team as infinity stones for Kiro, which really made me giggle. If you're into the whole Marvel MCU thing.
Yeah.
No, lost that reference on me. Not on Ran though, apparently. So yeah. Anyway, on that note, let's move along to our third article for this week. We've got nothing to do with serverless or MCP servers. This is all about a supply chain risk that was identified in CodeBuild. So there's an article on Security Boulevard. The title is CICD Under Attack, What the AWS CodeBuild Code Breach Flaw Reveals About Modern Supply Chain Risk. So I don't know if we've spoken about supply chain risk on the podcast before, but certainly something we talk about a lot in the business. But yeah, I'm not up to speed on this particular code breach. But what was it that piqued your interest here, John?
Oh, we have to talk about security occasionally. I have to, it's got to be done. We talk about AI and serverless enough. I have to talk about security once in a while. I thought it was a very clever kind of exploit, and it took a lot of work to make it work. I don't fully understand this. I haven't read enough about it. And that's usually a reason for me to talk on to bring it up on the podcast and then pretend that I know about it. But hopefully our guest knows more than I do, which usually works because I send them the articles and then they actually read them and I don't. So it's like mouthing off down the pub. Just eventually you either, no one will correct you and then you think you know a lot, or someone corrects you and then you learn. So let's go with that.
What do you know about it? Before Ran corrects you.
So it was related to, I believe, externally connected repositories and how webhooks were kind of validated with that. I don't know that this applied if you're using code commit, the resurrected service, because that works differently. That's still kind of all inside the AWS backbone, which is why I think security people quite liked code commit, because it was all kind of internal. You don't have to worry about this kind of thing. It was very complicated. Now they did it, and involved, I think, just standing up lots and lots and lots of GitHub repos and trying to get lucky with some automatic ID fields. I don't really understand how the hack actually worked, though. I think calling it a hack is a bit generous too, if I'm honest.
Yeah, I think in the end, again, not sure 100% on the details, but first of all, I think it's super creative. I think it was discovered by Wiz researchers, right? Super creative. I have no idea how they actually managed to get the correct GitHub account with the numbers, like the regex that they needed. No idea how they actually pulled it off, but they did. So, open source is open source. So you can also see the CICD definitions and everything there. You can go ahead and read and understand how things work. So to my understanding, there was one account of the AWS SDK that allowed other accounts to also have permissions to add code, to run pipelines, to have some sort of administrative permissions in the main repository. So you have like an organization where you have one account that allows other accounts to also gain access. So what they did is they saw that it wasn't like a strict set of accounts. It said like there was a regex somehow that if the account number, organization, or whatever, it's this set of numbers, then they can have access. So they generated an account that had this regex somewhere in the account number or something like that. And then they gained access to AWS SDK repository, and they were able pretty much to create pull requests, maybe to approve them, push code, whatever, which is quite serious because people rely on that SDK in their own applications, so they could inject malware, steal other people's secrets, send them to whatever they wanted, and nobody would know because the pipeline would be official by AWS, but they gain access to that repository and their pipeline. So that's quite clever. I hope I got it right, but I think I got it like 70% right, but it's still very creative. Honestly, I'm not sure that you can forever be certain that you're protected from it. Like you can use here very certain account numbers, but maybe someplace else, whatever you have an assumption, like a hidden assumption somewhere, even in the CICD, somebody's going to abuse it, especially if it's clear for everybody to see. I think it's very smart. It's very hard to protect from. And you need to remove all hidden assumptions as much as you can.
Yeah, the specifics of how they did it is interesting because it's a very complicated thing that they managed to achieve. The takeaways, if you,
it's not like they stole. It's not like they stole secrets from someone. It's just so random, right?
Yeah. The key takeaway for me is if you on that article click through to kind of one of the linked ones, because it's one of those that you go down 3 or 4 different rabbit holes to start to find actually interesting information takeaways, is CICD processes are horrifically under monitored. We look at monitoring our production infrastructure, we secure our production infrastructure, we look at metrics and data and just make sure that's all behaving and doing what it's meant to be doing. We don't really do that for our CICD environments, right? And if you click through to Web Pro News, which is one of the linked articles in the main article, it talks about this a little bit, and it also talks about monitoring things like not necessarily just costs, but unexpected build runs. So you kind of go, our developers are active between, I don't know, 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. UTC. Why are people doing builds at midnight? That shouldn't be happening unless you have something that you expect to happen. So making sure that sort of thing is monitored and checked and alerted on is definitely worth doing. And then the other piece, again, is it just highlights, I think, as you said, the fact that they didn't need to get to any production environments to start to potentially create impact. Obviously, this was a security team, so they've not gone and done anything. But this is where supply chain attacks start to become quite worrying because they haven't had to get to your production environment to affect your production environment. They've found one of the weaker links in the chain.
So observability across the entire stack is the key recommendation there, I guess.
Bingo.
But that also would be too late because it will already go to production. So I don't know. Maybe better gating between. To go to production, you need like a real person from
this is where you start
specific closed list of people that can actually approve.
This is where you start getting into a very complicated conversation about business risk and that kind of jazz. Because yes, we do full continuous delivery all the way to production because we trust all of our processes and all the rest of it. Oh, do you really? Okay. But then you absolutely slow down the pace of delivery if you have an actual person having to push buttons all the time.
True.
Yeah. if you're a Netflix type organization deploying thousands of times a day, whatever the stat is for their
I think it's like 1,000 times an hour or something stupid.
Yeah, but that's been the talk.
Yeah.
But that's been the talk that now with AI, I mean, the code review stage has become the bottleneck in the end, because you still want a person, a human, to review it. I mean, it's great that Amazon Q can review my code and say things like, "Hey, your style here is off," but you still need a person to understand the context and sign off on that.
Well, it's great. There's still going to be jobs for humans in this brave
telling
new
me
world.
AI
I'm not
wrong.
sure, because if you follow the next article, I'm not sure that there's still going to be jobs for humans.
Well, that
Yeah,
was
there will
my
be,
nice
just keep-
segue into the next article,
Sorry.
which is no, that's fine. We've this you've helped move me along to the next article that we're going to talk about, which is an article on the Register, and the title is Amazon CEO Andy Jassy goes wobbly on AI bubble possibility. So I think we've definitely spoken about AI on the podcast before, and I think we've spoken about this kind of circular deal scenario where AWS is investing in OpenAI, and OpenAI is buying compute capacity from AWS, and there's a lot of that going on in the AI industry, and a lot of commentators kind of highlighting this as a potential bubble that might burst. And this article is all about a recent interview with Amazon CEO Andy Jassy, who did not dismiss the idea that this AI bubble could burst. So, Ran, I'll come to you first on this, as you helped me with the segue into the article. So, what are your thoughts on this whole kind of AI bubble, circular deal scenario that seems to be going on in the AI space right now?
I kind of agree. Like I think it's going to burst at some point. I think many companies are going to just crash and burn, and just from the basic reason that it's not sustainable. Like, they're not making any profit. I mean, an average developer that uses ChatGPT for $20 a month, it probably wastes like $1,000 of tokens, even more. I don't know how many. There's no way it can be profitable for long term. And I think we rely too much on this. We're adding AI to all sorts of silly things, video making that are useless, and all sorts of use cases that maybe can be deterministic and don't really need to be. Sorry?
Have you seen the meme about people asking ChatGPT to make a picture of how they're treating ChatGPT? That's just that's a perfect example.
Global warming is worth it. Yes.
Sorry, carry on, Ran. I think you had a bit of a thread going there.
I think it's very brave of him to actually acknowledge that. But he did say that he predicts that it's going to be a good ending, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be a good ending for all the companies. So presumably he's hoping for AWS to come on top, but who knows?
That is his job.
Yeah.
This is absolutely a bubble. There's no two ways about it, right? And maybe this is where I start to sound like a bit of an old-fashioned 70s trade unionist, but they're not always wrong. Bubble is as bubble does. It is, in fact, a bubble. There's no two ways around it. There's absolutely circular investment going on. Maybe it doesn't look like that on the balance sheet because it's come out of this pot versus that pot, but it's all funny money on a spreadsheet anyway, right? As you say, OpenAI do not make money, and they are overly reliant on investment. OpenAI have committed to buying a load of compute from AWS, and AWS have invested in OpenAI. They have paid them to buy their own services. I don't care what anybody says. That is the reality of what's happening, right? One, that should be illegal. End of conversation. Trade unions rant starting to finish a little bit there. Cool. It's a bubble. OpenAI makes no money. But this is not a new problem for AI, okay? This is not a new problem for AI companies. The tech industry, as a general rule, has been overly reliant on stock market valuations. You get Series A and B funding, seed funding, A, B, fine. I don't have a problem with that. Series C, Series D starts to get a bit tenuous. I've seen Series F and G and H funding rounds before. Like, what are you playing at? You should be making money already. And maybe, again, I'm old-fashioned and am of the opinion, and I suspect Carl might share this one as a business owner, that companies should probably make money from 6 months in. Maybe I get the point that you're not going to make money on day one, but having revenue, being vaguely profitable, even kind of break even, that should be goal one. Okay, product businesses need time to go and make things, sure, if you're taking 6, 10 funding rounds to make a thing, to then maybe start to earn some revenue, and you're not profitable within a decade of running the business, you've done something wrong. This isn't a new problem for AI. This is a tech issue generally. I don't think you see this in other sectors particularly. You certainly don't see it in places like manufacturing, because they are physically making a thing. And again, I spent quite a bit of my life in retail and manufacturing and businesses that make things and sell them for money. And maybe that's colored my thinking a little bit. But this is a bubble. It's part of a larger tech bubble that we've seen some corrections of. I just hope that when the correction comes, it's not an if, it's a when, it's not too painful, but it will happen.
Yeah, the question is, where is the money going to come from? You know, Ran, you quite rightly pointed out that most of these things seem to be about $20 or £20 a seat or whatever, whether it's Chat GPT Pro or whatever they call it, or, you know, Kiro licenses, etc. You know, they're all kind of priced on a kind of a per seat per month basis, but that doesn't seem to stack up with the cost of delivering these things. I mean, the billions, the trillions of dollars that are going into building out new data center campuses and filling them with GPUs, etc. You know, where does the money come from to repay all this investment? You know, where does the return come from?
Kiro, I think, is a bit better in its model, and I've not used things like Claude Code and what have you, but ChatGPT is a good example, right? You pay your $20 a month or whatever it is, and you get functionally unlimited use of quite a lot of things. I don't think you get unlimited image generation, but you get functionally unlimited of quite a lot at the top end models. That's not sustainable. Kiro, granted, you get a block of tokens, or a block of, it's not tokens, you get a block of credits, right? For your $20 plus VAT or sales tax, wherever you happen to be, you get your 1,000. You get your 1,000 credits, and for $40 you get 2,000 credits, and then you pay for overages at double that rate, which kind of makes me think that the standard rate is at or near cost or very thin margins, but maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know. But the fact that there's an actual pay X for Y, I'm a lot more comfortable than that than just pay me this much money and do what you like.
But we've already seen things like, you know, price per token dropping, but number of tokens required to do a thing going up. So actually, you know, the overall impact is the cost of doing that thing has risen, but it's masked with well, tokens are now cheaper type argument. But yeah, I just don't know where this ends really. Any predictions where it ends? What
big fireball?
You know, yeah.
And also the gamer community is a major casualty. Yeah, gamer
GPUs,
community. Because
yeah.
GPUs and memory chips also, their prices.
Yes.
Like I've seen stores, they say you can't really buy the memory, DDR memory, unless you buy a new computer or you want the new 5090 RTX, whatever card, right? Video card, you need to buy a new computer. Prices have gone up. I guess for also the new consoles, they're gonna wait for a next round, you know, generation, because it's much harder to manufacture them at the current pricing. So yeah, gamer community also takes a hit.
The gamer community has been taking a beating for a very long time, right? I am a gamer. I did recently upgrade my graphics card. I went with a 5060 because I refused to pay £1,000 for a graphics card, and I got that for about 250 quid. And that was a nice sort of 70-80% performance uplift from the 1660 Super that I'd been running for a while now. And I paid about the same amount of money for that 4 years later. But the gamer community has been taking a beating on that for a long time, because before AI, it was crypto that wanted all the cards.
Yeah, crypto. Remember that?
Yeah.
It's still around, but it's not the cool kid anymore. Yeah.
No, blockchain is no longer sexy. Now it's all about AI. But you know, what's the next hype cycle? I guess it's, where does it all go? We'll just keep watching the news and find out at some point. But yeah, as we said at the start of this discussion, Andy Jassy has not ruled out that this is a bubble that's going to burst. So
it is a bubble.
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah. So that's going to burst. Is the yeah. I guess do all bubbles burst? No, some of them just float off and some shrink, don't they? But yeah. Anyway, on that note, let's move along to our final article for this week. And this is something we have spoken about fairly regularly on the podcast. It's the Amazon planned job cuts. I think there were a bunch, maybe 14,000 layoffs at the back end of 2025. There's another similar number about to hit this week, we believe. I've seen
tomorrow, I think.
Tomorrow, you think, around?
27th.
Yeah. So I guess a bunch of people in Amazon and AWS who are at risk, who find out tomorrow whether or not they still have jobs going forwards. So what are your thoughts on this, John? I know we've spoken about it on a number of occasions, but
again, this is where I start to sound like a trade unionist again, don't I? God, can you tell I'm from Britain? Jesus Christ. Oh, put my stovepipe hat on next week. So the mob from last time, it was about 14,000 of them, and that was widely reported to be due to AI, and it kind of was, but I feel that was again funny money on the balance sheet. They needed money to buy things rather than the jobs had been made redundant, but maybe people were being more efficient. I don't know. And it was in bits of the business that you won't have really heard of. It was in the Kindle department and the Amazon Goodreads and these sorts of things. I don't know which sections of the business are being targeted now. Prime Video, HR. Okay, well, HR kind of makes sense. Sales kind of makes sense because if you get rid of a lot of people, you need fewer people to manage the people. So that kind of makes sense. Middle management kind of makes sense. It feels like a general streamlining, which again, it's one of those funny things. I don't know how AI driven it is. And again, apparently Andy Jassy said that it's not particularly. It's culture and they have too much bureaucracy, too many middle managers, too many layers, yada, yada, yada. Fine. Okay, I can get on board with that. This isn't a unique thing to Amazon specifically. This isn't a unique thing generally, particularly for American large businesses that are very driven by quarterly results, numbers on the balance sheet, profit numbers, and all this kind of thing, because they're very beholden to shareholders and don't have the, I don't want to say ability because they could, but they don't have the willingness to kind of put a stick in the ground and say, no, we are not shrinking, we're not cutting, we're not reducing. We're just going to take a hit on the profit margins for a little while. We're going to make less money because they make money hand over fist. But they don't seem to want to make less money because that then reduces the share price, and they're very beholden to that kind of metric. They don't have the willingness to say, we're going to take a hit to the share price and we're going to put a stake in the ground here and use the people we've got rather than kind of growing. It seems to be that they kind of shrink when they need to look better and then grow again quietly later, to me.
What are your thoughts on this, Ran?
I feel bad for the people who are going to lose their jobs, honestly. Not a great timing in the industry. It's not that easy to find a job. Many companies, fire people. And I also think it's kind of messed up that they hear about it like a week in advance and they're not sure that it's going to hit them or not. So they see in the press there's going to be major layoffs at Amazon. I heard that they have memes like in their Slack channels about the two pizza team that now it's
one
not
pizza
going to be enough. Not going to be enough people. Maybe they need just one pizza or whatever. But I think it's messed up. It's like being a kid, you take I don't know if it was like this in the UK, but when we used to buy bubble gum, you get like a comics. It said, here's what's going to happen in the future. So it's like they're looking the news like, hey, you're going to get laid off next week. Oh, fun. Amazing. And they don't know if it's going to happen or not. So they need to go and deal with it for a week until they see it or not. Not a great environment, kind of toxic. If you want to if you want to fire people, just get on with it. Just don't push it for a week. I don't know.
Yeah, it's can't be a comfortable place to be, really. Just sort of sitting there waiting to receive the email, to find out whether you still have a job or not. But I just wanted to pick up on John's point about it being kind
Being
of
a trade unionist.
No, not that one. No, whether it's AI driven or not. So, I don't think it is, to be honest. I don't think this is a case of AI taking people's jobs. Certainly, in some industries, it absolutely will be. But I'm seeing things, for example, like in the partner organization and the sales organization, where AWS has been very successful in growing the business, winning new customers, winning new partners, etc. There's a lot of restructuring going on there, where of course they're putting the distribution channel together, they're pushing partners into the distribution channel. I came off a webinar this morning where they're encouraging smaller partners to lean on their distributor resources in the channel rather than the direct AWS partner support teams, because they simply don't have the resources to support the number of partners that they have. So with all this kind of restructuring that's going on in terms of how they're servicing partners, how they're servicing customers through the channel, etc., of course that is going to change the structure of that particular part of the commercial organization. So that's just something that I've had exposure to recently. Obviously, it's not only going to be that part of the organization that's going to suffer from these layoffs. Perhaps in the technical side of things, it is a bit more AI driven, but certainly I think there are sort of non-AI resource rebalancing going on right now. So but on that note, we have reached the end of our time for season 5, episode 4 of Logicast. So it just remains for me to thank you, Ran, for coming on again as our guest. It's been great to have you on again and to hear your insights into the recent AWS news. So we very much appreciate you giving up your time. And thank you, John, as always, for your insights into trade unionism in the 1970s UK. Under Margaret Thatcher. Don't
worry, I'm not going to unionize your dev team.
It's a whole different podcast that we're kind of leaning into there. But no, thank you both for sharing your insights into AWS news. Thank you for listening. If indeed you are still listening, if you enjoyed it, please do like and subscribe and tell your friends. Recommend the podcast to them. If you'd like to see the funny faces we're pulling and when we're talking about the AWS news, then check us out on the Logicata YouTube channel. And Rand's Rand's website details will also be in the show notes for his Rand the Builder website that he mentioned at the start of the episode. So thank you very much for listening. Thanks again, guys, for your insights. We'll be back next week with another episode for you. Until then, thanks for listening. See you again next time.